The University of Pretoria is a multi-campus public research university. It is a university that aspires to be internationally competitive and nationally relevant. As a shining example, the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences has academic and research programs that are proven to consistently conform to the highest of international standards. The faculty has 4 fields of specialization and aims to continuously strengthen its position as a leading institution in these fields through its academic and research excellence. The faculty pledges social integration and is known to be technically well-rounded. But above all, the faculty strives to assure that the market value associated with its degrees will always be of a competitive benefit to its students. In a world that is becoming more competitive by the moment, it is essential that students not only gather the education and skills necessary to perform in the marketplace, they should also receive practical experience that places them in the optimal position to find and keep the right jobs. This is what the departments in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences offer. It is the combination of real-world application by working closely with industry partners, along with the cutting-edge academic expertise of the top-rated and internationally recognized lecturers who have a great understanding of the expectations of global and local industries that make the difference. We strive to produce graduates that appreciate the importance of community, entrepreneurial endeavor, and innovative action. EMS graduates are a new generation of future thought leaders who will create jobs and make a positive impact nationally and internationally. Make today matter.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Karim from the Human Resource Management Department at the University of Pretoria. Welcome to the program at Crossroads, Reimaging Management Sciences and Inclusivity. During this program, we will be focusing on how management sciences at the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences view the TRESemmé clicks advertisement. The focus of the discussion will be from a business management, marketing, and human resource management perspective. This program will provide you with a different angle of the clicks advertisement. We are going to start with a welcoming address from the Dean of the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences, Prof Celebi. This will be followed by the introduction by Prof Stella Nkomo, who will provide us with an expert opinion on the topic. Prof Nkomo is on the editorial board of several management journals. She has received numerous awards for her scholarly contributions and is an A-rated South African researcher. Thereafter, I will pose some questions to the panel in the studio. I will kick off the questions with Dr. Oleboheng Celebi from the Business Management Department. Dr. Celebi's PhD research culminated in the development of a communication framework for South Africa's National Development Plan. We have Dr. Tinashe Enduro from the Marketing Department. Welcome, Dr. Enduro, and welcome, Dr. Celebi.
Thank you, hello.
Okay. So now we have, last but not least, we have Prof Neal from the Human Resource Management Department. He currently serves as an editorial board member at 2 Scopus accredited journals. At present, he serves as the chair of the Faculty of Economics and Management Sciences Research Ethics Committee at the University of Pretoria and chair for the HOD Forum of the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychology, SIOPSA. He is currently an NRF Y-rated researcher. Welcome, Professor Neal. For those of you who are watching this program, you can pose your questions to the panel after the discussion. Without further ado, I will be introducing the Dean of the Faculty, Prof Celebi, who will be doing the welcoming address.
Thank you for the introduction, Professor Karim. On behalf of the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences, a warm welcome to all of you to this webinar. The topic under discussion is extremely relevant, not only in the way that we shape the mindsets of our students, but also in the manner that companies conduct their business. I am looking forward to the introduction by Prof Stella Nkomo, as well as to the views of our panel members from Human Resource Management, Marketing Management and Communication Management. This event forms part of the centenary celebrations of the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences. Yes, we are 100 years old. Within this context, we are extremely proud to be able to contribute to this Crossroads debate on the reimagination of our subject fields within the context of inclusivity. Enjoy the webinar. Professor Karim, I now hand back to you. Thank you.
For your message. I would now like to introduce Prof Stella Nkomo, who will provide us with the introduction to the topic. Welcome, Prof Stella.
Thank you, Professor Karim. I'm very pleased to be part of this session. I was asked to provide an introduction today to today's panel topic, and I think the panel will be discussing the broader implications of the recent outcry against Click's offensive advertisement. In case you have not seen the ad, let me just summarize its content. Their hair product advertisement received widespread condemnation because it contrasted the inferior hair of a Black model as dry and damaged and frizzy and dull, to a white model's superior blonde white hair, labeled as fine and flat. Tragically, the positioning of white women as the standard of universal beauty is not new. The white woman beauty standard has had and continues to have a devastating effects on Black and brown women, with hair being a particular marker of a woman's beauty. And let me just say there that the standard of beauty dates back to the days of colonialism, when whiteness and white supremacy, unfortunately, became the ruling ideology of the world. The positioning of white women as the standard for beauty and Black women as abnormal reflects the racialized and gendered dimensions of systemic racism. Recall for a moment the tragic saga of Sarah Bartman, a Khoisan woman born in 1789 in the Eastern Cape, who was degraded and exploited by the derogatory name Hottentot Venus because her body shape was deemed abnormal by Europeans. She was taken to Great Britain in 1810 and exhibited as a freak at Piccadilly Circus. Upon her death in 1815 at the age of 26, her skeletal remains were preserved and displayed in a French museum, and President Nelson Mandela approached France to return the remains. After much debate and back and forth, her body was finally sent back to South Africa in 2002, 200 years after her birth. Flash forward to 2016, we have another episode. Pupils at Pretoria High School for Girls alleged they were forced to chemically straighten their hair and not have untidy afros, and the Department of Education was forced to intervene. I recall these historical events as a reminder that what happened at Clicks is not new. But every time it happens, there is shock and outrage. The tragedy is that there appears to be little deep learning or significant change. These episodes are only a few of many, but they reflect the persistence of systemic racism, unfortunately, in South African society. What makes systemic racism so powerful is its deep entrenchment. Rooting out systemic racism requires a deeper understanding of its meaning and the actions to address it. Let me take a moment and define systemic racism. Systemic racism refers to the existence of a dominant racial hierarchy that places white people at the top and other racial groups at the bottom in respect to advantage, superiority, and disadvantage, inferiority in all spheres of society, including our bodies. Now, of course, no individual or no company wants to be seen as perpetuating systemic racism or feel the sting of being labeled racist. But what makes workplace systemic racism so invidious is its deep embeddedness in the everyday ways of doing business, in the organization's culture, in its human resource management systems. And these are often invisible to those in power. Racist ideas and beliefs are so often ingrained in organizations that doing what is perceived by those in power as the right way to run a business can end up perpetuating negative racial stereotyping, racism, and exclusion. On its corporate website, Clicks makes the following admirable claim, and I'll read what's on the website. Clicks is a brand that consumers trust, and that brand has demonstrated its ability to transcend product categories and markets. But the ads suggest they still have much to do to transcend racism and demonstrate respect for a diverse customer base. One has to be puzzled as to why a company considered to be a successful retail chain was unaware of other prominent episodes of racist ads. Some of these you may remember. For example, in 2017, Dove, the manufacturer of personal care products, showed an ad of a Black woman turning white after using its soap. In 2018, Swedish clothing retailer H&M caused an outcry with a photograph of a Black child modeling a hoodie with the logo, "Coolest Monkey in the Jungle." I could go on, but I think you get my point. We've been here before. In response to the outrage Clicks experienced, the CEO apologized and pledged to accelerate the company's diversity and inclusion efforts. An apology is an important step towards reckoning with the problem. However, the company must ask, what else must we do? What is our responsibility? At the same time, the CEO's very apology raises questions of whether diversity and inclusion interventions are mere window dressing or what some scholars have referred to as happy talk that avoids addressing systemic racism. We hear too many expressions of apartheid fatigue in our country, the desire, which we all desire, to be past race and racism. But ironically, episodes like Clicks reminds us that we're not past it. And perhaps the only way to get past it is to directly acknowledge and deal with it. So today our panel is going to delve deeper into the implications of the Clicks advertisement for business in the workplace. While the outcry appears to be off of the media's radar screen, it raises profound questions in respect to the transformation of business and the detrimental persistence of apartheid's racist legacy. It seems every time we appear to be progressing towards a social justice for majority population, we are reminded of how much more we need to do. At the core are issues of representation and power in our organizations. Companies like Clicks will point to the appointment of Black employees and directors, but the real question is, how much power do they really have? Who sits at the table when decisions are made? Do Black and brown people have the power to speak out without being penalized? Will this episode fade away like that of what happened to Sarah Bartman or to the Black girls at Pretoria High School? Is it enough for Clicks to apologize? And can they repair the reputational damage that has been done? What can other companies and institutions learn from the Clicks debacle? What does real transformation and inclusion in business require? These are the issues that will be discussed by our expert panelists. I now turn over to Professor Karim.
Thank you, Prof. Stella, for your expert opinion and insights into the topic. As I mentioned earlier, our panel members comprise experts from different fields in the management sciences. Please do reserve comments and questions for after the panel discussions. I will now pose the questions to the panel members, starting with Dr. Celebi, who is a business management expert. Dr. Celebi, what is your opinion on the Clicks advertisement?
Thank you, Prof. Nasima. I would say that the advertisement itself was very offensive, and I think it was tone deaf on the part of Clicks. I do agree with what Prof. Stella just said, that it gives a deeper indication of some of the systemic racism that does exist, and I don't believe it's necessarily a white problem or a Black problem. I think it's something that's ingrained in all of us. For instance, I come from a Tswana background, and you know, there's this saying that everything that's good, they'll tell that person that Kilekua, meaning that person, oh, she's a white person because, oh, she's so beautiful, she looks like a white person, you know? So there's this perception that white is beautiful and good and all that. I think it's deeply ingrained in all of us, so it's something we all need to work on. So I do think it was tone deaf on the part of Clicks, but it does give a deeper indication that we do have a lot of deeper issues that we need to deal with.
Dr. Enduro, coming to you, what would you say?
I would say, I think the fact that there was public outcry and the fact that consumers were not happy, it didn't sit well with consumers, and the market indicates that the advert was not good. The advert clearly evoked negative emotions. And with any good advert should be an advert that doesn't evoke negative emotions. So in the context of this advert, clearly it was a bad advert, not well thought. And it was also very offensive to a lot of consumers. So in that respect, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done by Clicks as well. And I think generally by a lot of marketers, they need to be conscious of diversity. They need to fully understand the environment. I think clearly there's that lack of acknowledging diversity and also lack of full understanding the environment and how consumers would perceive certain images and how they would perceive certain adverts.
Professor Neal, from an IOP and HRM perspective, what would you say?
Well, it is actually surprising that elements like this are still consistently happening. I mean, as Prof. Stella mentioned, it's deep-rooted. Yeah. And the thing is, but you have to be sensitized towards you have to be aware of your society where you're actually going to put something like this out in the public. And you have to also understand the deeper elements before you actually continue in order to see what's the type of reputation you want your business. What do you want to retain? What do you want? What's the type of message you want to put out there? And you have to be very sensitive on that. And so it comes down to what type of people are you utilizing to get the right message out, and what is the message you want to convey. And I think what happened here with this advertisement, there wasn't a clear, systematic pilot of the marketing campaign that put out there. I don't think there was a clear discussion or a good veto system in order to make sure the message are going to convey it in a certain way. And obviously, that is where the problem lay. Is just the processes that was followed, and who actually in the end actually approved this. And I mean, in the end, it has reputational damage towards the business.
So, Professor Neal, what you're saying is that what could have been done differently is that more consultation should have taken place related to the advertisement.
Yeah, I think you have to make sure if you work on marketing, I mean, you will also know, Dr. Celebi, you have to have the people have to understand what do you market, what's the campaign about, what it should be, what should be done, but you also have to have the right people sensitized because if you're not sensitive to it's not only consumers, there's a whole society. And I mean, it's now in the public. It's not like only in your geographic and what you thought this is the message for those type. So I think a deeper, as Prof says, there's deeper elements. So there should be a deconstruction of what's beauty, or what is meant with beauty. I mean, there is perception. I think Dr. Celebi already mentioned, Dr. Enduro also mentioned it. There is a perception of what beauty is. And it should be reconstructed. I mean, you can't, if you put out there still that view of what beauty entails, it still skew the view of what real beauty is. And beauty should be a natural thing. It should be part of what you are as a person and what you bring to your society. I think that is where the deeper elements have to start with.
Okay. And from a marketing perspective, what would you say, Dr. Enduro?
Yes.
How could the advertisement have been placed differently?
I think from a marketing perspective, ideally, if they'd used models of the same race. So clearly, the public outcry came from the fact that through the perceptions of consumers, when they viewed the advert, when the advert was presented to consumers, the impression that consumers got was that white females A was better than black females A. So in that regard, I think if the marketers had just used one race group in that context, then I feel that maybe this problem wasn't going to happen as well. So yeah, I think definitely from my perspective, the notion of comparison which came to play here. And also I think also here, it's also a very sensitive issue and a very sensitive topic for all women. Yes. And in this context, the fact that that comparison played out for the consumer when they perceived or when they viewed the advert, clearly that evoked a lot of negative emotions in a lot of consumers. And that was unfortunate.
Yeah, because I agree with you. You know, in a lot of communities and societies and cultures, they say the beauty of a woman actually lies in the hair. And, you know, that is why in certain societies in that women are expected to cover their hair, to hide their beauty, you know, not to expose their beauty. So I fully agree with you. Dr. Celebi, what would you say from a business management perspective?
I think it's very important for organizations to remember that they don't operate in silos. That they're part of a bigger environment, part of a larger community. And I feel like in the situation with clicks, they kind of forgot that they form part of a particular community. And in that community, people have different perceptions of beauty, they have different perceptions of different advertisements, and it's important that environmental scanning takes place on a regular basis, that organizations don't lose touch with the communities and the environments that they exist within. So I think that was a huge mistake on their part.
And Dr. Celebi, what do you think is the impact of the TRESemmé advertisement on the clicks group from a business management perspective?
I would say it comes down primarily to reputation. Because like there's that saying by Warren Buffett where he says that, well, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of he doesn't care if you lose money for his business, but he does care if you lose reputation for his business, right? Because reputation does have a huge impact on your profitability. So no organization wants to be perceived as racist. I mean, just the term racist, it's, even when you just say it, it evokes these horrible feelings. So no organization wants to be attached to that. So definitely the reputation of being seen as out of touch, possibly racist, that has an impact on the profitability of a business, so yes.
And Professor Neal, would you say then, you know, being this thing not wanting to being perceived as racist in that, does it now bring in the element of explicit bias or implicit bias in that? Is it a bias?
Yeah, the thing is with explicit bias, if it is, it's very clear. And the thing is you consciously or intentionally provoke racism or bias. Implicit bias, if it's unconscious and you're not always aware, it becomes explicit when you become aware of it and someone calls you out and say, but what you said is biased.
Yes.
If you don't have that tough conversations, then we'll never have this happen in the future. So that is where it's very important, especially with this advertisement, because I can't say or conjecture, oh, this is explicit bias.
Yes.
Maybe they just thought that is their perception of beauty.
Yes.
And that was maybe still unconscious. If for us, everyone else, it was, we can see. There is a comparison. There was a comparison made between one social group with another social group, and that for us, that's explicit bias.
Yes.
And we experience as explicit bias. But maybe for the person who actually thought out this process, thought, oh, this perception of, and that is where it may be implicit, it becomes explicit when you actually are called out on that.
So, Dr. Enduro, would you say that the marketing team plays a major role in advertisements, considering what now Professor Neal has said?
Yeah, no, I'll definitely say that the marketing team, it needs to be very critical. So as marketers, we need to fully understand our environment. And I think obviously issues of diversity play a part. If a marketing team is diverse, be it from an age perspective, gender perspective, race perspective, clearly different viewpoints will be seen. And even from a marketing perspective, the more diverse your team is, the more creative you are. So I think definitely those issues of diversity come into play as well. And marketers, as marketers, we need to be critical and we need to do our homework consistently. We cannot assume. We always need to make informed decisions that will sit well with the consumers or that will be received well by the consumers.
Okay. Professor Neal, coming back to you, what would you say is the impact of this advertisement on the motivation, especially of employees working for a particular organization that is, now I'm just generalizing now, of different companies that have bad advertisements and that. What do you think, how would it impact the employees working, especially when there's negative repercussions from the public and, from other groups and that?
Yeah, the thing is, something like this is in the public, so exhilarated, and it's about the reputation of the company. You, as an employee, are associated with your company because of the values they bring out and to their consumers and to the public. And if something like this happens, it means what the company is selling is not what they actually are, what they are doing. Prof Stella also mentioned it. You can have all these nice systems in place. You can have all the policies, but the actions speaks louder than words. I mean, it means you have to expose values that you say you live by, but there's no congruation with what you actually are doing. And that is where maybe with employees, when they saw this, it's like, okay, I thought I'm working in an inclusive type of environment in a company, but now what happened, and it seems there's still elements in the management that actually brought forth this type of perceptions when the marketing went out. So they will be obviously demotivated, disengaged. It's gonna there's a revalue. You have to revalue what is my place in this company, and do I still want to be associated with this company? So that is not only for the public; it's also the internal structures and the internal environment of the company is also affected heavily by this in the employees. Obviously, they want to put food on the table, they work for that, and that is where their motivation is to. But they also want to feel included and accepted in their environment and also in their company. If they feel that is the type of values that are being sold by this company, I mean, then you would feel, okay, it seems my social group are reflected in a negative light. So what's my place in this company?
What would you say, with the job market being so tight and so few jobs in that, would employees still stay within the organization, even if there's negative, marketing campaigns and all that run by that organization?
But the thing is, the socioeconomic status in South Africa actually generates that you want to, you work, your motivation is just to have money and to actually to live by, to feed your family. So that is the motivation. The thing is, you have to go into an environment where you have to give up something about yourself, your own ethnicity, your own values, your own, and so you have to disregard that, and that is when you can have employees in your organization that's not going to feel they feel belonged or accepted. So the thing is, the emotional part of that is where it comes deeper in, and what they are going to be exposed to in the company. While they are still there, they're going to be working, they have the other motivation that they come into the workplace, but it's not a conducive environment for them on a long-term basis.
Okay, Dr. Enduro, stemming from that point now, what would you say are some of the qualities of a good advertisement and that of a poor advertisement?
Okay. So I would say a good advert or a positive advert is an advert which is able to clearly convey its message and also evoke positive emotions in the consumers. And then a negative advert would be an advert which is unable to clearly convey its message, and also in the process it also does evoke negative emotions in consumers. So for example, if I think of a positive advert, I can maybe give an example of Dove. There was an advert of Dove in which it actually showed different women and of different races. And the mantra behind the advert was that you need to embrace your inner beauty. So in a way, that advert was sort of conveying its message in a very clear manner, but it was also evoking positive emotions. And then if I think of a negative advert, I can think of the advert by Benetton, in which you have different world leaders being sort of intimate, images of different world leaders being intimate, and there was public outcry. So clearly Benetton was unable to clearly convey its message, and clearly it evoked negative, unfavorable emotions in consumers. So I think with adverts, it boils down to your consumers. How do they feel when they see your advert?
Yes. Oh, yes, I remember that Benetton ad. And the thing is that there was an outcry from the Vatican as well, because, it shows the different world leaders kissing each other in that, and also the Pope kissing a Egyptian imam. And there was a huge outcry from the Vatican because they say it goes against their religious beliefs and their culture, the way the culture is within the Vatican, in that, the Pope kissing somebody and an imam kissing another person in that. So I think we need to, besides racial sensitivity, we also got to be more sensitive towards people from different religious groups as well as different cultural groups in it. So it has a lot of deep-rooted and deep-seated sentiments here. It's just not surface-level implications that we are talking about. Exactly. And the Dove ad also, I remember that ad where they not only depicted women from different race groups, so they also depicted women from different age groups as well. So the thing is, they took age as well into account. And a lot of the times we kind of like ignore age and other kinds of diversities. We're so focused on race and gender that we tend to forget that within advertisements there's other types of diversities as well. And we should be more sensitive to those different types of identities. We should sensitize our marketers as well, I think. Dr. Enduro, would you agree with that?
No, I would agree with that, in the sense that I think as marketers we need to fully understand our environment. So if we're operating in a specific environment, we need to be fully cognizant of who's in that environment, the consumers, their profile, their culture, the gender, religion. So as marketers, we need to do that work to fully understand the environment. Because obviously through our communication, we can evoke certain emotions, negative or positive emotions, based on how consumers would perceive our adverts. So in terms of marketing, I feel that marketing research is key. And as marketers, we can't take shortcuts. We have to fully understand, we have to be fully embedded in the environment. And if we do that, we'll be able to fully communicate effectively with our consumers. So I do concur with you there.
Okay, would you also concur with me then? I think all marketers need to enroll for a diversity and inclusion course?
No, I would say, I think if I look at my students, or the students that I've taught and the students that I taught, be it in my department, in some of the modules, we do focus on that. We focus on understanding the environment. In one of the modules, actually, it's consumer behavior. We do touch on that a lot. That as a marketer, you need to understand the behavior of the consumer. And for you to understand the behavior of your consumer, you need to know who that consumer is. You need to understand their gender, you need to understand their culture, their religion. And if you do that, you are able to effectively communicate with that consumer. So in a way, through the training that I do, that I give actually to my students, and that we as marketers ideally should give to our students, is that we should make them aware, and we try actually to make them aware of the environment.
Okay, that's great. And Dr. Celebi, how, in your opinion, how would we create an inclusive South Africa, the wider society, the macro environment, as well as within our businesses?
I think it's important for us to change our mindset on inclusivity and diversity, especially in a country like South Africa. When we look at the business context, a lot of organizations kind of feel forced to be diverse because we have policies like BBBEE, and companies just feel like they have to have people of different races and cultures, ethnicities, and all of that. But I think it's important for organizations to change the mindset on inclusivity, and to realize that inclusivity is actually an asset, that it's an asset for an organization to be diverse. And we should actually capitalize on our diversity. Even as South Africans, we should see our diversity as an asset and not something that separates us, but something that brings us together. So I think it's that perception of what diversity is. We think of it as difference. But it's not actually about what makes us different, but it's about what makes us unique, right? And bringing that uniqueness into our organizational settings, I think, is very important. So I think we just have to change our perception of diversity in organizations, and also even in incorporating diversity into our hiring practices, not feeling forced to do it, but realizing that it's an asset and wanting to build up on that asset. So yeah, I think that that's practically how we can deal with diversity and the benefits of it.
Professor Neal, we've been discussing quite a bit on social identity and categorization in terms of groups and that. And how would you say, what role does it play when confronted with an advertisement like this?
Yeah, the thing is, and we already discussed a bit more about the different social groups you can be part of. I mean, there's more diversity in your group as well. I mean, you have your gender, your age, and etc., and also religion. So the thing is, what we already mentioned, it is like a comparison between one social group with another social group. And if you associate very strongly with your social group, and in South Africa we are very, not fixated, but very focused on the race, on your race group. So if you associate very strongly and you feel your social group are threatened or portrayed in a negative light, then obviously you will, it will generate more intense feelings and emotions in actions, and what we also saw what happened with the outcome of the marketing campaign. The thing is, and while the other social group who is portrayed more in a positive light, that is where, if that is the comparison between the different social identities, what is the best social group and what's the bad social group, that is, or the positive or what's a negative social group, that is where the problems lie. There is no real, what we can say, this is the better social group, that is the better social group. We have to deconstruct totally what we are thinking about when we think about what is your association with beauty, for instance, and what values and all those elements. So if you want to build inclusivity, I think Dr. Celebi already mentioned a lot of those things, is you bring as a person towards your workplace your own personal values and your own religious values, your own social categorization values, what you also have. And you want to see how that actually compare towards what the organization is doing. And that is when people go for interviews, they usually go to the website and say, oh, that is what the company is doing, and that is what they are are actually saying their core values or in their mission statement and their vision and so forth. But when they come and they see, but that is totally different. The attitudes are totally different from what they are saying they are doing, the perceptions. And I also say if you want to have inclusivity, it's a lot about leadership, what type of leaders you have. Because if you don't have a very inclusive leader and the leader is not a very good exemplary of what is inclusion, then the whole department or company will struggle to have a good, inclusive environment or a conducive environment for everyone to be able to function in. So social identity in South Africa is very important. We did a lot of research where we saw in the different linguistic groups. We did research in the Nguni, the Zulu, Xhosa, Swati, and the Ndebele, and we did in the Sotho-Tswana groups with Sesotho, Sepedi, Setswana, and South Sotho, and then also in the Afrikaans English group. And we saw the social relational element is very important still in South Africa, very important. You associate very strongly with your social group, with your social, the social element of yourself. So when we ask people to describe themselves, they describe them in the sense with someone else, how they conduct themselves with someone else, and then sometimes they will describe themselves with individualistic type of terms. Oh, I'm committed, I am organized, and so forth. But when they had to describe, when we asked questions about describe yourself, the social relational element came forth more strongly. This is how I conduct myself with others in my environment, in my social environment. So that is why the social identity element is very important, is very strong in South Africa. But also pertains also what we found in the emerging adults group, and it's from 18 to 35. There is some shift with the social identity, while with the older generations, the social groups element is still very stronger. We found it's more stronger in the older generations. So that is where, if you're gonna, like a company with a marketing campaign, you have to be aware of your consumers and all those type of elements and those deeper elements. If you have a deeper understanding of those elements, then you know how to pitch your marketing campaign. And also to make sure, obviously, before you do a marketing campaign like this, that you also have a pilot before, a test audience. I think that is also custom, do that as well.
And what would you say is the impact on employees, especially like if there's such negative advertisements and there's so much negativity, and you know, I'm just talking now in general, you know, the impact on organizations in it, and how would the companies experience, you know, if it happens that there is downsizing in that organization?
Downsizing overall is obviously not a nice exercise to go through. But that is we're not going to say it's going to happen now with clicks, for instance. But I mean, if downsizing happens, it's just you have to be aware of those elements that's for the remaining employees and those who's obviously going to be displaced. So the transitional elements are very important. So what is the transitional elements you put in place to start with the downsizing? And you also have to make sure you're transparent in your communication with employees, you're transparent with them about what is the process going to be and what is going to be the elements we're going to look at in order to start with the process. So there should be consistent communication. They have to make sure that there's also measures in place. For instance, if you have to outsource some of the work responsibilities, all those type of communication needs to go through and have to be communicated to the employees. And also then after you have to make sure with the remaining employees that there's also some more support type of support systems in place to make sure they also can still function optimally in the organization.
Okay, Dr. Celebi, from your perspective, what strategies can the organizations use to rescue a business that have negative publicity?
I think we can start off with an understanding. I know in business we talk a lot about people, planet, profit.
Yes.
And we often focus a lot more on the profit aspect and we forget about the people and the planet aspect, without realizing that if people and planet aren't happy, then profitability also will be affected. So I think it's important that we, in our strategies, in our organizational strategies, we don't just focus on money, but we also focus on how our behavior impacts on people and planet, because that affects our profitability.
Yes.
And then I do think as well that it's important that we, as I think all the other panelists have already said, that it's really important that we ensure that we understand the environment that we exist in.
Yeah.
I know, again, in business, we always talk about having a pestle analysis and a pest analysis and all of these things, but how often do we actually do that?
Yes.
Because when we look at this particular situation with clicks and the TRESemmé ad, you can see that they didn't understand the social environment, how people perceive beauty, all of these things. Also, they didn't understand the political environment, because we saw there was a huge political uproar that came with this entire case. The technological environment, because now people have social media. I honestly don't think this we would have had the level of uproar that we had with this ad had it happened 20 years ago. But social media also plays a role in precipitating this movement that we see happening right now. So it's very important that organizations understand the environment that they exist in, that we shouldn't just say all these fancy things and talk about all these different kinds of analyses, but that we actually do implement this on a regular basis. So yeah, I would say if organizations can do that, and also I think just as what Prof Stella said, that the organization did take responsibility for what happened, which is really important. So we're glad that they took responsibility, but aside from that, a lot more can be done.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Enduro, from a marketing perspective, what would you say? How would you approach it? I mean, you already mentioned a few pointers.
Yeah.
You know, before an advertisement is aired or that, what to do in that. But any other pointers that you can give us?
I think I would say, first of all, market research, thorough market research. And I think it's key. Through your market research, you'll be able to sort of get a sense of how people are going to be receptive to your advert. And I feel also that things like your pre-test piloting, you need to pre-test, you need to test the waters first. And I think in a context like South Africa, I think there are no shortcuts there. Because obviously your market research, it might be a bit costly, it might be a bit time consuming, but in reality, it's worth it. It's important to invest the time to fully understand the environment. It's important to invest that time to have your sort of your campaign tests, to have your pilot studies, your pre-tests, where you include people from different backgrounds in South Africa. So, so I feel as marketers that it's key in that context to fully embrace market research.
Okay, and Professor Neal, from your perspective, what would you say? You know, when you have all these protests and that against negative advertisements and that, in terms of staff, how staff feel and that, obviously they also go through a lot of trauma in the process in that. Do you think how we can assist staff in that and who can assist them? What assistance can they get during such, you know, negative protests in that?
Yeah, the thing is, it depends on the protest and how the protest is handled. I mean, if it becomes violent, obviously it's going to have more intensity. The thing is with employees, especially who's on site or in the different branches, they have to understand what the precaution measures are in place, and especially if there's an emergency of one of the branches are going to be stormed in and there's going to be so they have to understand what is all the employees have to have knowledge of what is the emergency protocol to follow and what is the necessary contacts to make, and also to make sure they and also their consumers are also safe. So I know in one of the branches, most of them exited the back doors, and there was a lot of other protocol in place in order to make sure, and the police was also involved and so forth. But the thing is that just the aftermath of that is usually where you have to look out for the employees, because you have to make sure you have a secure environment for your employees in order to function in. And you can't do that if there is an element like this going forth. With protesters, the protesters just want to have their voice heard. They want to make sure their messages are coming across, and that is what the reason for protesting is. So the thing is for companies is usually just to say, okay, you can protest, but you can protest in a certain area and so forth, because that is maybe the best strategy to use. To say, okay, you can protest, you can do it that side, but that is the conduct you have to do it in. Because you have to look out for after your company, you have to look out for your employees, and also you have to understand that your employees also have to function in that type of disruptive behavior. In disruptive environment. So you also have to be conscious of what can you do as the employer to make sure your employees will still feel like secure, they can still continue their job. But if you as an employer feel but that is not a conducive environment for them to continue, then obviously you have to close down some of those branches and so forth. You have to make the call as the leader to make sure, assess the situation, make sure that you can continue, or if you can't continue, then you have to close down rather the premises.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Neal. So now since we have limited time, there's only going to be time maybe for one to two questions from the audience to the panel members. So the first question is from Prof Coupe, our Vice Chancellor, and he says, how do you create new institutional cultures for diversity to become meaningful and not just surface phenomena? So from a marketing perspective, Dr. Enduro, what would you say?
No, I would say that it's important for people to appreciate the benefits of diversity. So with diversity, it creates creativity. Through diversity, you're able to solve problems more effectively. So it enhances your problem-solving skills. You become more creative, and I think actually it's key for people to fully embrace and understand actually the benefits of diversity. Through diversity, we can all benefit by embracing diversity. And I think also it's also key as well for people, and be it for marketers and for society in general, to fully understand that ultimately we are all similar as well. We do have a lot of similarities. We might have differences, but let's try to use those differences for our benefit in reality.
Yes.
So as marketers, if we embrace diversity, our marketing campaigns will be more effective, they'll be more creative, and they'll be able to reach to all the consumers more effectively. So it's good. Diversity is good.
Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely, diversity is good. And I think it should not only be for marketers, but it should also be for the entire organization. The culture of the organization has to be reformulated. We have to go deeper into what makes us different and similar as well. So the thing is that we have more similarities, obviously, as human beings than differences. And we should embrace all different types of individuals within the organization and change the culture and take out all those deep-rooted, things that keep us back as an organization as well. So this, Professor Neal?
Yeah, the thing is, I think also just, I think it also pertains to your leadership. I think it's the most important.
Yes.
The type of people you put into the leadership roles in your organization, especially in a big organization with different levels, from low down to top down. And the thing is, you can have all these nice workshops and so forth. You can all have this, but the thing is, you have to have a real tough discussions. You can't just sugarcoat and say, but you have to delve deeper. You can't just, especially if you have discussions in a leadership workshop and so forth. But you have to really delve deep. You can't just on the surface have those type of discussions. And the thing is, as I said before, you can say you stand for inclusivity, but you don't actually enact those type of inclusivity. So that is where the most important thing is. All the companies have all these nice policies in place, but you don't. That is just, it goes down to the people. And how people actually understand inclusivity and how they actually voice that inclusivity and how they show inclusivity. And the thing is, you as a person also want to belong in the company, but you don't want to lose a part of yourself in the company. So you want to feel the freedom to be your authentic self in your company, and to make sure everyone embrace those type of diversity you bring towards your organization. Not to say, okay, that is not part of our values, sorry, that part of you is not you can't bring that to the company. That is the type of elements you have to look at. And so it goes down to leadership and it goes down to the people in the organization.
Yes, it's true, Professor Neal. I agree with you 100% that we should celebrate all our differences as well and our similarities. It's not only our differences that make us individuals, but it also forms part of our social identities as well. So when you embrace people and make them feel included in organization, then obviously people will be more willing to work there and less willing to leave the organization. So that's very important, but also implementation is very, very important. And a lot of times we have all these fancy policies and procedures and processes, but we don't actually follow up. We need more diversity champions within organizations. So thank you, audience, for your questions as well. Unfortunately, this is all we have time for. Thank you for joining us for an insightful discussion. I will now hand over to Prof Stella, who will now summarize the discussion and close the program. Thank you, panel members.
Thank you, Professor Karim. I don't know if I can do justice to the rich discussion you just had, but I did pick up about 3 important points. The first takeaway for organizations is they need to be aware of their environment. And in South Africa, I think that means putting your ear to the ground and trying to understand the different cultures and be very aware of the tensions that still exist around issues of race and difference. The second point that stood out for me was the question of representation. As Dr. Celebi said, a lot of companies have tried to do transformation by getting numbers, more Black people in, more colored, more Indian. But it's much more than that. Who sits at the table? Who's making decisions? Because I cannot imagine that if there were Black women especially in the decision about the ad, that they would have approved it. So it makes me wonder, are companies chasing numbers too much and not making sure that people have power? The issue of marketing, as Dr. Enduro talked about, that marketers have to do research, they have to test ads. So there were some very practical recommendations for those in marketing. I think a very interesting angle that hasn't been talked a lot about, what impact did this ad have on the employees of Clicks? It's ironic to me that they took the brunt of the boycotts and also people storming some of the stores. They did not go to corporate headquarters, they went to the retail chains, which are mostly staffed by Black people. So what impact has this had on the diversity climate for those employees? And lastly, especially in relationship to the Vice Chancellor's question, how do you achieve inclusivity? Well, I think, as Dr. Neal said, what we've been using in the field is what we call practice theory. And what companies need to do is they need to sit down and do a thorough diagnosis. They need to look at these systems and processes where racism can be hidden, and they have to take each process and say, okay, this is the way we do advertising. This is the way we do hiring. With the current processes we use, who gets included and who might be excluded? So we have to be a critical diagnosis of those things that we think are the right way and sometimes the only right way to run a business. And so that's hard work. So those were the key takeaways for me. And maybe the audience has other takeaways. But as Dr. Karim said, we're out of time. So let me just give a vote of thanks to Professor Lutz, Professor Karim, Dr. Celebi, Dr. Enduro, and Dr. Neal, and most of all, to all of you who took the time to be part of this discussion. I hope that you will continue this important dialogue within your own organizations. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Professor Stella Nkomo, for that wrap-up. And I want to thank the audience as well for watching us on this program. And I believe it was very informative as well. Thank you to the panel members, Dr. Celebi, Dr. Enduro, and Professor Neal. Thank you for all your insights. It was very insightful, and we've learned a lot in the process, and I hope that the audience have also picked up a few pointers during this discussion. Thank you and goodbye.